to the client available the least restrictive, most effective options. And so one of the most common options for AAC access is touch. And the things that I really like to think about when I'm thinking about that direct touch access is consistency. So consistency of location so that we can develop that really solid motor plan, that consistency of positioning from page to page, consistency from location to location. Go. And then also thinking about what that next step will be. So we've developed the motor plan, but then are we gonna outgrow what we were handed, and now there's new words and they're taking up new and different spaces and they're pushing our previous words to other locations, or the size has changed and now we're relearning again. So really creating opportunities for that plan for growth together as a team can be really helpful. And one of the tools that you can utilize to do that is the hide show features that are available across a variety of high-tech AAC devices. The one showcased here happens to be PRC. Sometimes they call it, making the button visible or invisible. There will be a little toggle depending on which communication system settings you're operating in. The other nice option, it can be developing like specific ones that you turn off so that you can target a specific skill development or reduce the motor demand in that moment, because we're doing a vocational task, or I have an individual who presents nationally on his communication device. And so he'll utilize this feature to reduce the demand necessary while he's up in the middle of a presentation. You got a lot going on in a presentation. So I have a specific love of round holes on my key cards because I find the Tech Talk you can see on the bottom right corner has these large squares, and it is nice and raised, but when you're reaching in there, a lot of times you'll get an additional finger in, or a thumb, or just inadvertent hits that we didn't intend. And I think round holes reduce the frequency of that and really help develop, especially for a newer user, develop those isolated point with your index finger or your thumb or whatever you're utilizing to do your direct access. All right, so one of my other favoriteest features out there for access. So it'll be called different things across different devices: key padding, button spacing. But what it is that it increases the space around each button. So even though your locations themselves will become smaller, they are easier to access because there is a greater room for error. But it's not just motor, it's also visually easier to access. So because the buttons are a little bit more isolated, you can locate them a little easier on your visual scan versus, especially if there was any horizontal nystagmus, where you might have a little bit of lack of smooth convergency of the eyes moving across the display, then having that little bit of spacing can make all of the difference in the world. All right, so timing is another place. This is one of my things that I adjust later, if I can, in my, as I'm tweaking adjustments, it's not my first go-to, but if we're still struggling after a little bit of exposure and time, these things can make a really big difference. So acceptance time is the time that you have to press the key before it will say, you mean the letter J, or you're saying this word. Repeat delay is the space of time after you've pressed the button before you can activate that same button again. And so this makes typing challenging, because if you have a name like Jennifer where it's got double N's in it, now you need a space of time before you can hit that second N, even though it's very intentional. Or depending on how your language system is set up, you may be pressing the same button several times to get to the level that you need to get to, and you're going to increase the span of time that needs to occur. So I really think of my role as like an efficiency expert. And so I'm always thinking like, okay, is this the fastest way? Our AEC users out there are already slowed down comparatively. So let's make things as efficient as humanly possible. So the repeat delay is only as large as I need it to be successful. And for me, successful is not 100% accuracy, because I know I trip over my words all the time. So I've low work, like 80%, 90%, what the user is comfortable with, if they're able to give feedback, provide feedback about their level of accuracy, because you're gonna make mistakes and it's okay. Everybody does it. And so the other features that you might have within this timing setting is like the activation occurs when you very first touch the screen, or the activation occurs when you've let go of the screen. And so for some individuals, it can be really helpful. They might push on a button and then their finger slides kind of off the button. And if they would prefer not to use a key guard to help with that, or they can get onto the screen, but once they're on it, they can get to where they need to be, and then they release the screen and in the right spot. So those can be really helpful. And you, if you want to try this at home, can participate with practicing these things on they're already built in. Like if you have a Google phone or tablet of any kind, an iPhone, iPad, you can go inside touch accommodations and play with that and see how that changes the feel of your own personal device. Or on your Windows computer or MacBook, you can go into your keyboard properties and again adjust that repeat delay and repeat rate and how quickly, so that you can get a sensation of how that impacts your access. Another one that happens a lot, life happens, saliva can be really impactful now that most of the high-tech devices have moved to a conductive screen. Conductive screens do not appreciate wet fingers. They do not like drool. And if you have a wet spot somewhere else on your screen when you're activating, the activation will not occur. So, and then of course our paper products don't tend to like to be wet. So some really cool things that are out there. There is waterproof paper that you can print on, which is awesome. So instead of having to, like I have a heavy duty laminate or whatever, you can go right from the beginning and print. This is what menus in restaurants are often printed in, and then it gives you a really nice matte finish, which might be helpful for some individuals visually, to have a more matte finish. The other one that I'm showcasing here is a chat bag. And so there's a protective screen layer on the top that doesn't prevent your access, but at least it makes it super wipeable. I've also used Uline bags in a pinch. They're really hardy, they're inexpensive. You can poke a couple of holes in the corners and put little key rings on them to add a strap if you want. If you get a nice heavy duty U-line, which you might find in your office buildings. And then I always like to empower people, if possible, to be independent. So I'm showing this lovely tennis accessory, and you can utilize to clear the screen for accessing again, to help manage that wetness. Eye gaze is another really great closer to direct access option. The camera picks up the reflection off the back of your pupils, and it uses an algorithm to translate that movement of your eyes onto the screen as the cursor. And I don't know, like a raising of hands or whatever, like how many of you know All Access Life? Brad is a very cool gentleman up in Canada. He goes through and reviews products and video games and all kinds of different technology things and sees how they work, and has this really great YouTube channel. And I'd love to show you this like little clip. It's kind of out of order, but I'll just do like a little snippet. This is Brad using his eye gaze tracker. And I'm going to show Brad again later using 2-switch scanning, so you can see how quiet Brad's body is. That quietness and efficiency of access might be what makes the difference in my evaluation of moving somebody from a switch scanning to an eye gaze. Like, they're not sweat, like there's not perspiration on their brow, they're not holding themselves and holding their breath to really be able to perform the movement that they need to direct access or to access with their switch. So that's definitely a plus in that area. I have some little things that I do within the eye gaze that I use as kind of my little tips and tricks: positioning, setting, lighting, visual appearance, camera, and then some options for glasses. So positioning, one thing that we kind of have to bite the bullet on with eye gaze is that it is in your face. And there's not really any option except for it to be in your face. It is supposed to be, depending on the camera, 18 to 24 inches is kind of like the starting guideline, and level with your eyes or just below it. And then I find in the positioning, like it's really important, like if you're looking down at the device, even though it's directly in front of your eyes and at the appropriate inches, like your eyes may be hooded and your beautiful eyelashes, long, beautiful eyelashes tend to get in the way. So a lot of times bringing the device up will open those eyes up nice and wide and get those eyelashes out of the way so that we get better access. The other thing that's really challenging is that the eye gaze device needs to be tilted level with the person's eye on that rotation as well. And so a lot of Good Samaritans or users themselves don't want their device angled because it looks weird or it triggers our OCD tendencies. Did we have, I saw a hand raise. Please feel free to like jump in anytime. um, so a lot of times it'll be tweaked. The other thing that I find really valuable if you're in the process of assessing someone is that you try it in other places. A lot of times, individuals who benefit from eye gaze also have a lot going on with their bodies. So, being in a relatively gravity free, or at least gravity's a little more working with them, like really nicely tilted in their wheelchair or in bed, or for some individuals, like up in a prone stander so that they're getting support fully up. Sometimes I'll even have individuals that use like a little pillow underneath their chin while they're in this prone stander to reduce the amount of effort they're putting into their bodies so that they can be more effective with their eyes. So the more stable that we can make them, the more effective they'll be at utilizing the eye gaze device. And it also goes, this is especially for neurologically based vision challenges. The more neurological demand that you're using to support your body, the less neurological power you have to use your vision. So being well supported, I know I had an individual that was evaluated at Perkins laying down. He could see 20/20 upright. He was legally blind in every sense of the word. So definitely it can make a huge difference with these neurologically based vision challenges. All right. Settings. So on timing, again, like efficiency, less is more. I don't want the user to have to stare at a dot for a long time to make the activation occur. So for most of my users, I'm like between 700 and 800 milliseconds, depending on which camera you're on. The feel of that, even though it's a official scientific time, is different. And again, these are like kind of my starting places. This is not an official thing. And then for all of my individuals that are what I call my glancers, so a lot of times these individuals have a neurologically based vision impairment, or it may not be diagnosed, but they have a neurological disorder, and they tend to reach, like look away and then reach. And those are my people that need a really short period of time for the activation, because they're just going to glance at the location and then look away. They're not going to sustain their glance. And so coming down on your timing can be really beneficial. And again, these are starting points, as everybody's unique. And then the other thing that I like to start with, just like when we were doing touch access, you have the options to manage a repeat delay so that the same button is not activated over and over again, or the layer below isn't immediately activated after the person's made their first selection. Can be really beneficial. I tend to prefer dwell as my starting point versus eye gaze in combination with a switch or a click, or even necessarily a blink. Like this is usually where I start for most individuals, because a lot of times when you try to make the motor movement to activate the click, your eyes track away. Just like students are learning in driver's ed, like you remember that first time you had to like click the blinker, your car like swerves off the road, because your hands are still connected to your eyes and you have to learn how to separate them. And so that's where I like to start. And I like to start with the shrinking dot. Some people end up with the clock or there are lots of other options. This is just generally the starting point. So like that you're watching, it has a little movement, so it keeps your visual attention. Really powerful. And then the pointer is a question whether it's a yay or a nay. Sometimes it's really helpful. Some individuals can monitor the pointer moving across the screen and use it to give themselves biofeedback about where the eye gaze device is reading their eyes and noticing where their eyes are. Other individuals see that moving and they can't pull their eyes away from the pointer to make their selections, and they get distracted by the pointer visually. So just keep it in mind that if you're facing a challenge in this kind of settings place, that might try it with it, try it without it, and see what you get. All right, lighting. The newer cameras are all starting to be better at tolerating outdoor lighting. Previously, I would have told you like it doesn't really work so great when you go outside. You know, it uses the way it picks you up is use of infrared light. There's lots of infrared light when we're outside, and it detracts the quality of the reading. The newer cameras do a significantly better job. However, a lot of users still have the previous cameras, right? And some cameras are better than others. So as a rule, I would say to generally avoid a very strong backlight so that the lighting is not facing the screen. Like if you're in front of a bright sunny window, that can detract. Maybe a little turn at an angle will solve the problem. And then kind of the same thing facing the other direction. If, you know, the screen is here and the bright sunny window is right behind it, that brightness can, you know, fatigue the eyes and reduce access for the user. The same thing with the screen. The screen may be too bright. And we'll go into this in the appearance on the next one. But for the colors, the white colors might be too bright and you need to tone down your color palette. Reducing brightness has an extra bonus of increasing the battery life of your device as well. So that's awesome. And so another place that I tweak to improve visual and access to eye gaze devices is our visual appearance. So looking whether we're looking at dark on light, or we're going to like this medium zone where we're a little bit darker on the background and a little bit lighter, or we've got the traditional kind of white background with the lighter colors and multiple colors across the top. You've got kind of these different levels and layers, and some work better for people than others. A lot of people complain that the high contrast symbols are actually more challenging for them to see and interpret than the more traditional ones. So sometimes just going with like a nice dark navy or a dark gray background with your more traditional symbol set can make a huge difference. And then just like the touch, we're going to talk size, like the consistency, your location, size, that from page to page we're not changing too much if we can help it, and things are in consistent locations. The home button is the home button on every page, or your clear button is the clear button location on every page with very few exceptions. And so always somebody that's going to break the rules. These are not rules, they're starting points. And then once again, our key padding can really make a nice difference by creating that space in between buttons and letting us be able to better scan it. The other thing that might not be aware of is that there are lots of cameras out there and lots of camera options. So the camera that is on the Tobii Dynavox is not the same camera that is on the PRC device. And Grid Pad through Smartbox offers several camera options. And so those cameras are each going to be a little bit different. And because that algorithm is like based on someone, the one algorithm might be better for one person's eyes than another algorithm. The other thing that does change slightly from camera to camera is the angle that camera is mounted at the bottom of the device, and that can also impact where you're positioning the device, and that might also improve an individual's access. And again, some cameras do better with those bright lights and being outdoors, and some don't. So I would say that I'm like dumbing down the number of years that I've worked now. But after doing, I was trying to think of it coming into this, like I'm pretty sure I'm around 400. I've participated in about 400 eye gaze evaluations that I still cannot walk through a door and recognize who will be a good eye gaze user and not be a good eye gaze user. You've got to offer the opportunity and let it happen, and it's either going to work or it's not going to work, and like gotta try. I can't predict. There have been people that I like could clearly see their eyes looking around the room, and I was like, oh, they're going to be great, and put multiple devices in front of them and nothing. And other users like that, I couldn't see anything going and have done fabulously. So definitely, if they're struggling for an access method, this is a great option to try. The last kind of tweak that I might do for the eye gaze device is looking at the individual's glasses. So most of the companies offer some kind of setting where you check off like, oh, this individual's wearing glasses. I have questions like about what that setting actually does. Sometimes it's helpful, sometimes it's not helpful. And if the user doesn't need their glasses for the reading of the device, I would also consider trying with and without the glasses to kind of see which is their better access method. Again, kind of playing with it. Most of the time, glasses are fine, exceptions of them being filthy or being like prism glasses or very thick glasses or tinted can really impact the individual's access to the communication device. Most of the cameras offer an ability to track a single eye. Sometimes the computers get a little confused after you've told it to track just this one eye, that this other eye can kind of like popping in and out. So you can also tape one side, if they wear glasses, tape one side of the glasses so that that eye will not be picked up. A little bit of Scotch tape and it will prevent that. Head pointing is another great option. Sometimes is a little less touchy than eye gaze for some users. It does require a little bit more neck control and can be fatiguing for some individuals. So really contemplating that. But there are lots of really great options out there and some really new stuff that's coming out, like Smile Mouse. That don't require you to wear the beautiful silver dot, or hat with the little silver dot on it. Glass House is one, seen here below the Smile Mouse logo, which has a little gyrosphere inside it. And so it gets the tilt of your head. It works with iPad and anything that's Bluetooth accessible wonderfully. And can be a really great option. And the things, this again, are like that positioning piece, being able to really use your neck fully for that and be well supported so that you can. Adjusting settings for how far you need to move your head vertically, horizontally, to be able to move that cursor. And then kind of education. So most of the head pointing softwares, when you arrive at your device, you need to kind of calibrate it almost every time. And most of that time just means that you need to turn your head side to side and lift it up and down, and then it's ready to go before you make your first selection. But educating your user on that so that they're not trying to get to their first hit before they've done that. The other one that's really cool, like joystick can work really well for a lot of people. There are different toppers, different options. This BeJoy joystick is an add-on. So you pull the topper that's on their power chair off and you slide it over the top of their power chair joystick pin and put the topper back on. And now this little USB dongle plugs in and you're able to have it act as a mouse on your device using that joystick wirelessly, beautifully. Does not work well for individuals who have that, like, to keep their chair in a significant amount of tilt. It's kind of heavy, and so it pulls on the joystick and it thinks you're constantly pulling your joystick down. But it's a really great place to try it out if you think that it might work. And then your power chair might already have it. So this is an Arnett joystick, and they come on Permobil and also Sunrise medical chairs. And a lot of times if the client has multiple seating functions, so like they can tilt or recline or lift their legs up, their chair is going to have this enhanced joystick with this fancy display on it. And it already has Bluetooth turned in there. It just hasn't been turned on yet most of the time. And so you can get together with your durable medical equipment provider and have them turn that on for the client. And then you can pair the joystick to the communication device or computer or whatever the individual is using. It's awesome. Used to cost thousands of dollars to purchase this add-on for people's chairs. Now it just comes with them. It's awesome. All right. So switches. I love switches because I love to do switches, but it's kind of generally my last option. There's never rules. Everything is, it depends. But if you have to go this route, there are lots and lots and lots of options out there. We have ones that are mechanical, so the actual force activates the switch. We have switches that are conductive, like your phone screen, so you don't actually have to touch it. You just need to come within so many millimeters of the surface and the switch will feel the electrical impulse in your fingertips and activate. So you won't need a lot of force. They can be wired, which is frustrating in itself, or easier, depends. And then Bluetooth, or there are some less commonly radio frequency switches. So that's like your garage door opener style. And so Brad up again, and this is Brad using 2-switch scanning on his Dynavox. There we go. He's composing the same message, I love green. And he's doing a grouped scan, so that's another piece that you can look at what the efficiency is. A grouped scan is going to be more efficient than a linear scan.
I love green.
All right. I did not add the videos to today's presentation, but if you are interested in switch scanning and AAC users, there is really wonderful set of videos done by the Prinke Romic company of this little girl, Haley, and you get to really see her development. So there's photos on the right-hand side are all of Haley, her development over time. The gumballs, so the middle green switch on the right-hand side on the modular hose is a gumball switch, and that's, they started with just one switch, touch the switch and it would say more. That was only for a few moments just to kind of get the orientation, and this is like at the very beginning of the video, so they had actually moved the switch closer to Haley to, again, to improve that efficiency. And then Haley grew her switch skills almost immediately to 2-switch scanning. Her language system grew over this time, but the other things that you see, Haley to the left here in her stander with these buddy buttons providing her switch access. Haley in her wheelchair at the top with conductive switches. So these are the candy corn switches from AbleNet, providing her move and pick, or move and select, right? And then Haley down here at the bottom right, again, providing move and select, but her laying down in bed with her switches. So are really that can be developed. So, all right. My first big one is develop an unaided yes indicator, like a positive indicator, is really helpful. And then if possible, I will utilize that as my selection switch location. So if it's a head movement, I might use it, or if it's a touching this part of your tray, or that sometimes I can translate that into the switch access. My move switch, move to the next option, always goes where the person can just move incredibly easily. And I don't mind 100% if it is hit a lot, because until they make their selection, there's no error. So they can be scrolling, and I do find sometimes teams will become a little uncomfortable because switch scanning users will frequently just scroll aimlessly. Well, what appears to be aimlessly, but this is part of the language learning, motor learning process, and they're just checking it all out. So they're scroll for months on end, and then make selections when appropriate. And so it's okay. Don't inhibit it. So observe those movements, observe the different locations we can be in, and care if they're little or they're adults, play. Like, it's already incredibly challenging work to access switches. We need motivation to be incredibly high to overcome this motor learning challenge. And I'm sure you all have faced, or at least I have faced, like when a brand new computer system or a brand new appliance is handed to me and I have that initial knee jerk, like, oh, I don't know if I really want to get into this. This is going to be tough. And it takes time, and you got to have high amount of motivation to overcome that initial off-puttedness, and to put the work in. And what all of the educational motor learning studies are saying is both cognitively and physically, we learn the most when we are playing. So really, really make it engaging and motivating, driven by the individual. Language organization for switch scanners is so incredibly important. Again, we're thinking efficiency. We can't be going layer upon layer upon layer because we want larger locations. We got to be able to get to things quickly. For individuals that do require like a linear scan, I generally cap out at 8 locations for my linear scan. Beyond that, it's too much scanning, and we need to start learning how to group items. That being said, don't be rigid. None of the rules, all the rules are it depends. I'm sure someday I will run into an individual who breaks, well, I have run into almost all of my rules have been broken by somebody. And so, like, don't be rigid. I do have over my career only 2 out of all of my users, 2 users who were single switch scanners, who were faster as a single switch scanner than a 2-switch scanner. All the research says you are faster as a 2-switch scanner, but for these individuals, it was not true. And they were more efficient as single switch scanners. So don't be rigid. The other thing, like what you're seeing here with Haley, is a lot of times we have this idea that the switches need to be on your left and your right for some reason, like the left and right of your head or the left and right of your tray. For some individuals, that crossing over of midline, even just cognitively, can cause like a little stutter that reduces their efficiency, sometimes being on the same side. And again, don't be rigid. It doesn't always have to be a hand. It doesn't always have to be a head. Could be an elbow, could be a foot, could be a knee. My 1-switch scanner, who was super efficient, used would bend his calf. Like, he hit the switch with his calf by swinging his knee. Incredible. He could single switch scan faster than I can. Consider auditory scanning. A lot of times there's some pushback that the communication device is speaking to the individual. But when we look at things like, if you were at a swim competition, when the people go off the block, there's a big bang and they go off the block, or a running competition, same thing, bang, and they go off the block, because it's a faster motor reaction than if you do just like a little flag wave. So we want things to be fast. And so lots of times having that auditory can just make things go a little bit faster. And then, of course, the switches themselves are complicated enough. I add this, and it should be added to everything, but especially here, really thinking about keeping it simple, stupid, right? For some teams, like Haley's lovely candy corn switches require a battery. You need to check the battery and make sure that you've changed out the battery when the switch stops working. Unfortunately, I've run across teams that cannot manage that extra layer of challenge. So we choose switches that don't have a battery in it. When we choose switches that are wireless, we have a lot less cord management. But then on the other side, if they are wireless, there is some level of Bluetooth management or dongle management, however it's synced to the computer communication device. And so then there's a level of kind of technology sophistication that the user support team or the user themselves needs to have to be able to troubleshoot that. So, and then later on, when I go into mounting, like, again, we can keep it simple with our mounting. A lot of times, if it's possible and I'm using an arm for the communication device, and this is the person that uses their hands, I will mount the switch right to the arm for the communication device. So that way, it's one thing you put on the chair when you're getting set up in the morning versus two. Anything we can do to make any bit of the day more efficient and simple, the better. And then don't forget, there's all kinds of other crazy stuff out there that could be the ticket for someone. Adapted stylus, mouth stick, laser pointer, partner assisted scan. There's lots and lots of other great options. And some people need a variety of options, more tools. So bringing Brad back one more time for a partner assisted scan. Everyone. So eye gaze was fastest, partner assisted scan second fastest, and two switch scanning fell into third place for Brad. But for another individual, it may be different. I will have shared out this access method feature match that my coworker Alana Shabbat and I created that tries to put together some of the different types of devices and what kinds of features they might have and what kinds of skills you would need to have it to utilize it. So that hopefully it'll be shared in the chat and then shared later in the newsletter access to that document. All right, and mounting. So there are lots and lots of great options out there. Daisy, Mountain Mover is another company. Ideas for Independent Living, Rehadapt, which is also called Connect It when you go through Dynabox, and then Modular Hose is another option for mounting. So I'm showcasing in just a quick desktop sample from Daisy, and then Daisy's rolling mount. These rolling mounts come in two different heights. So if you needed to be able to get much lower for a particular individual or much higher, the big frame is really nice for going around a recliner, but not so great for getting around a tiny apartment or bedroom. Can be really challenging in that case. Some more Daisy. Daisy does make a leaner group called Daisy Light, and so which has nice like removable clamping arms. You can just clamp it onto and move to and from different devices or locations. So here's an Evolve stander with the Daisy Light mounted to the crossbar with the arms up. And then it's got an iPad holder on the back of the iPad. This individual uses touch chat on her iPad. And so that's the daisy light. And then again, another daisy. Well, so this is our traditional daisy mount here, and then the daisy light arm mounted off of it for the individual switch access, so that we have that one mount. The other switch stays on the wheelchair on the headrest, so that doesn't come on and off. But for getting out of the chair purposes, the second switch has to come off. The other one that I really like for the keep it simple, it's more challenging to get on the chair and mount correctly, but more wonderful, or can be more wonderful for some individuals, is this daisy rear folding. So this mount does not come off the chair. You do need to be utilizing a power chair or like a tilt chair with custom seating, so that it's a heavier chair, because the mount is a little bit heavier itself. So Daisy is concerned about the tipping of your wheelchair. So the device would be in front of the user. The little arm lifts up and then it folds back and then folds behind the user. So their device is right there and ready to go. You transfer out, transfer back in, flip back in front of them and ready to go again. So there are two versions, a locking and a non-locking. And so any chair that has some tilt in it is supposed to have the locking version. So that's. And then I wanted to make a little plug. So you're not always I really like to get the full order form so I can look through and pick and choose what little different things that I might be able to change about what's going on and really be in control of those details. And what I would say is especially the newer Tobii Dynavox can be a little challenging to get onto the Daisy mount. They do make a small face Daisy mount, and that slides in better than the larger TUSB mount, this little rainbow shaped item with the pin, right? Fits on there better. And you have your options. So like on our previous slide, it just slid onto the bar and there was no adjustment. Pretty much every time I'm seeing an eye gaze user, I'm selecting this two-handled option if I'm mounting with Daisy, so that I have some adjustment, right? We were talking about tilting to match rotating to match the location of the eyes. This can be really helpful. Also, it provides care support providers a way to make some quick adjustments without tools. I try not to hand tools out because sometimes the bolts get a little stripped. But any of us, as we sit throughout the day, our spine compresses, or stand, your spine compresses either way, and you get a little bit shorter. If you measured yourself in the morning and you measured yourself at night, you're a little bit shorter at night. So you might, if their position is really sensitive, you need a smaller or you need adjustability. And so it's one way to get it through Daisy. I would say as a whole, I tend to like that Daisy is rugged. It doesn't tend to have a lot of in the moment adjustability. And so depending what the wraparound team is for the individual that you're working with, that can be a really good thing, that there isn't adjustability and everybody that comes through the door is making tweaks in hopes to help the person out. And then so I really like it, and they have a lot of options. They do are sensitive about mounting to alternative things. So you can get a desktop mount and a clamp and things like that. But if the user is using a conveyed stroller type or some other like less common seating options, Daisy is very concerned about the safety of the device, as they should be, and mounting to that type of equipment where you might get a little bit more flexibility with some of the other mounting companies. All right, Rehab Adapt. I have to say, when I was getting into the field, or like probably my first 8-9 years, maybe a little longer, I was not a fan of Rehab Adapt because I felt like they came out of adjustment more regularly than the Daisy mount. One of the things that I have since learned that I very rarely see in the field is that this, where the bar drops in to the bar vertical and then horizontal bar drops in, has to be perfectly level. So that's supposed to be level, and that's why it's coming out of adjustment, because if it's not level, there's constant pull on it. And I don't see a lot of people setting up their mounting this way. The Rehab Adapt stuff is very light. I appreciate that. The brushed aluminum is very nice. There is handles at varied locations, so you can make quick adjustments, which can be a really good thing. And I really like, if you're not super comfortable with mounting, or the people you're working with as a collaborative team aren't super comfortable with mounting, they do offer virtual mounting services. So you can take images of your client and some very basic measurements and send those along. The images are automatically blurred out to protect your client's privacy, and they build the mount for you and show it to you this way, so that you get a sense of kind of what it's going to look like, and send that back to you, the quote back to you, so that you can proceed. They have some nice options. This is the Vero for that rolling mount. Again, gets around chairs nicely. Can go under bed, does tend to not work quite as well in small areas. And then we have this like double table clamp option, which can work really nicely in a variety of places. I've done it on a bike, in between two seats in a van, so that the client would be able to use their device while traveling in the van. The other really nice thing for funding purposes, so both Rehab Adapt, and then I'm going to show you next ideas for independent living, will, if you're going from something like this to something like this double, you can use like the same top half and then just need this one additional piece. They will quote it as a mounting kit, so that you're only getting one line item, which can allow you to submit to funding for this one set, versus trying to ask for a second mount. And a lot of funding sources won't pay for 2 mounts, unfortunately. And then Ideas for Independent Living is out of Canada. They're a really wonderful group. They will do lots and lots of custom work. I like, so they have like a gas spring based wheelchair mount, which I really like for non-tilting wheelchairs. And it allows really quick, easy height adjustment of the mount, and it swings in and out nice and easily for users that are doing it independently. It's a really wonderful option. Their machined aluminum parts all have like a very high-end feel. The wheels on their rolling mount like just glide very smoothly. And they they are one of my favorite rolling mounts. So the rolling mounts are on these like star-shaped bases. They pivot, so you can kind of kick the wheels in as you go by something and then kick them back out quickly. And it's very modular, so you can get sections of different heights. So you can be standing up in our Evolve stander for part of the day and then come down to seated position and just take one of the middle pieces out of the mount, and you're ready to go. And then the pieces that are in your rolling mount are the same as the components in your desktop clamp. So you can, keep this top half the same and just transfer it between both items. So you're not purchasing 2 full mounting sets. And again, they will package it for insurance purposes, which is really wonderful. And so I had very lovely success with it. Modular hose does mounting as well. It's relatively inexpensive. It's a great place to start if you're not sure what's going on, or that you want, like you're just trying to get a placeholder. I don't like the creaky sound that it makes. And individuals with a lot of tone or force in their overshooting movements will move the device in and out of position. So if you need movement, that might be good. If you want it to stay still, not so great. So again, these companies all do switch mounting as well. And you can get clamps, you can get suction cups, can mount directly to headrest hardware. I'm really liking this flex arm from Rehab Adapt that allows the individual, it moves away from the individual when they press too hard on the switch, and will come back into position as soon as they alleviate that force. So it can be really wonderful for individuals with seizure disorder or challenges with the tone, that they're not getting beat up by the switch. And again, I'm just going to put another plug, and this is the Daisy Lite, but I've done Daisy AbleNet or Daisy Rehab Adapt. You can clamp your switch onto the mount, or mount it directly to your device, or mount it directly to your wheelchair. Stop having lots of components you got to put on every time. All right. So that was a whole lot of me talking. Anybody have any questions?
In the interest of time, we've been collecting the questions so far in the chat. So what I'm going to do is collect them all, send them to Jen. She'll address any of those outstanding questions, and then we'll put those answers into the newsletter that you're going to receive after this session, just to give us a little bit of time to go through our community discussion. Some of the questions that I've seen, I think, are also going to come up as part of this discussion as well. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And here we go. The case study is actually a case of Jen's that we're going to go through quickly, but I think will prompt, again, some of these discussions about how all of you are addressing some of these topics as well. Brief synopsis, Jen is working in, Jen, you can explain where you work.
Yeah, we're private practice, have school contracts, and then also vocational rehab contracts, or private pay contracts as well. We do not accept any insurance, although we get the fun of participating in insurance when we're trying to help people get equipment. All right. So Adam is a 20-year-old. He attends a specialized school. He's, in the years of transition, and is starting, to look at life after school. He has been a long-term communication device user. He has spastic CP. And it says wheelchair and gait trainer, but I would say at the beginning of our evaluation, he was not a wheelchair user. He could only be positioned in a gait trainer because or a prone stander. And so in the process of evaluation time, there is this wheelchair, which is, he actually is positioned prone in this wheelchair. This is brand new. Hasn't actually officially been delivered to him yet. We were taking measurements for his communication device access. So he had an I-12 when we began the evaluation that he had been using for the past 5 to 6 years. And he was having a lot of difficulty with access. He really wasn't accessing the device successfully very frequently at all. The best place for him to access his device was in his prone stander. He was most successful there, but even within the prone stander, it was really dependent on his fatigue level, weather, and tone, and just kind of like other medical issues that might be occurring in the moment, whether he could access. And so when we looked at his access, it appeared eye gaze was not working very well for him. But when we asked for the trial, or when we did the evaluation, he did better with the new eye gaze camera on a different device. But we were concerned, we didn't want to go down exactly the same road anymore. So we also requested switches as well. So during the trial, we did both switches and eye gaze, and Adam was actually the one to determined which one he was going to be using it at any given time. In some positions, he tended to select switches more, and it did also appear that fatigue would be a reason that he was selecting to go to switches instead of use the eye gaze. So he started using eye gaze significantly better on the GridPad 15 than he had previously been using it on the I-12. I-12 has an older camera that isn't as tolerant of light. Adam, it's a very bright location. There's lots and lots of windows. So I don't know if that is contributing factor, but we were expecting him to become a 2-switch scanner, and he did, but he also started communicating with his eyes a whole lot more too. So we proceeded with going to purchase through insurance. Another reason that the GridPad was selected over continuing with the Tobii Dynavox was that we were also wrapping in some of thought about what he might be doing for computer access as an adult, and the computer access options within the GridPad are a little more, the user interface is a little more simplified, a little more streamlined than the user interface. Like there's awesome computer access stuff within Tobii Dynavox, but it tends to be a little bit more visually complex and cognitively complex than Grid 3 software. I was really hoping that Adam would like the Rehab Adapt Flex mounts like I do. He did not. And he preferred the modular hose. So we ended up with modular hose because, everybody's got to break my rules. And, we did Praetorian switcher interface so that we could be wireless. Adam has a really great support team around him that will be able to manage the batteries need to be charged and taken care of. And we had tried both the Aaliyah camera and the Lumini camera, and the Aaliyah IntelliGaze camera was the more effective camera for Adam. Although again, I would say he's breaking my rules because in numbers wise, Lumini is winning in our practice.
So in terms of a discussion, I put some kind of general thoughts that, that Jen, you could kick it off with maybe how you start approaching the kind of the variability in position like you had with Adam, and then some of the differences that you talked about in your general presentation. And then I'd love to hear from other people on the call about how they go about approaching it, any differences, other considerations they have, or methodology for approaching those differences in positions.
You guys want to yell out the questions? Or?
Yeah, so how do you approach, how do you start out when you're looking at, so someone like Adam who has variable positioning needs, how do you begin approaching that in your assessments?
Lots of observation and playing with the stuff. So for Adam, he has a big love of music. So we did a lot of like music-based pages with switches and eye gaze, and trying that same page set in our stander, over the prone wedge, in our chair, or in our gait trainer. So like trying all those different places and kind of getting Adam's feedback about what worked well, what didn't work, and really trying to keep it so that the stuff we were doing is not inhibiting his ability to decide whether it works for him or not.
And then I would be really interested in recommendations generally for, particularly for speech pathologists who might be leading AEC evals in a given setting, but do not have the support of people like Jen on site. Any strategies or tips and tricks you have for working around some of these challenges?
Yeah, I think really not being afraid to try some little tweaks and really observing the entire body, entire movement, like really looking at individuals globally and what's going on with them, and say, oh, I notice you're tilted back more. You know, do you like to be that position, or is there a reason you need to stay back, or can you come up more, or you know, getting, sometimes I can get feedback, you know, sometimes individuals themselves can give you a lot of feedback about what works for them and doesn't. But lots of observation, because there are also things that we all do as people that we don't even realize we're doing, and sometimes you can translate that like, oh, I noticed you're really good. I have a client that's really good at hitting the little horn button on his power chair to get somebody's attention. Like, well, if you can touch that button, like you've gotten in this habit, like we can put a switch right next to that button that now is one of your switches. Picking and choosing what you see already going on.
I will say for myself, I was fortunate to be trained by some very excellent OTs and PTs who I'm no longer with, but I'm a big fan of farming out skills that I do not have. So locally here in Orlando, we have some very talented reps, one of whom might still be on with us, who I've definitely had come in on some of my more complex positioning or access cases. Many of your reps are going to have a lot of experience with some of these different concerns and some of the accommodations or modifications to the systems that they have seen and that they know are successful or compatible with the equipment. And so even if it involves extending some of the time on some of my assessments in order to accommodate multiple reps, that's been something that's been very effective. And if I am working with someone who's still in a placement or setting where they have OT or PT services, just not in my location, if they're open and willing to collaborate. We talked last week about kind of creating forums and observational tools in school settings. We've done similar things in assessment planning. So working kind of some pre-planning with some private practice or other setting providers, sending any tools ahead, and then trying to zoom in or do any kind of recorded conferences to kind of observe what it is that they're doing and experiencing. But certainly open to any other suggestions that anybody else has used in their practice.
Not just your AAC reps, but also your durable medical equipment providers can often have lots of assistance for your wheelchair seating, and they sometimes have some mounting experience as well.
We just had a suggestion. Thank you. The Out for AAC. If you're not familiar with that tool, it is a great tool for assessing and planning and looking at some of these considerations. I don't know, Jen, if that's one that you've used in your practice.
Yeah. I like their levels of switch users. I think it's a very apt explanation.
All right, in the interest of time, we do have just a couple of reminders and things we want to talk through. Just a reminder, we're meeting again next Wednesday at 12 o'clock. We have support considerations for AAC users with complex vision needs being presented by Ms. Tannel Neufeld. We look forward to having more case-based discussions. So we did create a Qualtrics links to submit case studies. It's a little bit hopefully easier and more user-friendly for anyone who'd like to submit their own cases to get feedback from community discussion and shared resources. We also have our ECHO website that links all of these disparate links that we have for registration, for things like the case study submission. You can find all of those links housed there. As a reminder for our participants, we will be sending out a newsletter following the session, including, again, many of these links. We will have Jen's follow-up information for questions that were shared today, but that's also how we will be sending out the CEU form. If you attended last week, or if you could plan to attend in the future, you do only need to complete one participant form. They're all being collected. We'll be tracking the sessions. I mean, you're welcome to send as many as you'd like, but you only need to do it the one time, and then they will all be collated at the end. As a reminder, you do only receive CEUs for the live sessions that you attend. So any recorded sessions, although we are recording and they are up on our YouTube channel, they do not yield CEUs at the end. And then I wanted to make sure I got out the contacts for everybody who's here today, myself, Julie on the UCF team, and then Jen's contact information is there on the kind of access side of things, and we'll be sharing some of her specific recommendations and tools that she shared today in that follow-up newsletter. Thank you for everybody who attended today. We appreciate it, and look forward to seeing you guys again next week.
Hi, Jess.